The observation chamber smelled of nothing. That was the first thing researcher Veldon noted in her field log when the human was brought in, the sterile absence of scent that her kind associated with clinical precision. She breathed it in like a reassurance. Here, in the controlled quiet of the unbroken Meridian's medical deck, everything would go according to protocol. The human's name was Corporal Marcus Hale. He had been retrieved from the wreckage of a Drift-class scout vessel 17 hours ago, floating in a debris field near the Cathani corridor. His biosignature had been faint, barely a tremor on their long-range array, but Veldon's superior, Chief Observer Rosanis, had insisted on retrieval. Humans were rare finds this far out. Humans in distress were rarer still. And humans in distress were, according to Rosanis, invaluable. He has suffered what the human medical databases describe as a compound fracture of the lower left limb, said Technician Evros, reading from his scanner without looking up. 3 cracked ribs on the right side. Laceration across the back, 11 centimeters. Mild concussion. Dehydration. Oxygen deprivation over an estimated period of 4 hours before retrieval. Veldon studied the man through the transparent observation wall. He was strapped to a diagnostic platform, conscious but barely, his eyes half open, clouded with pain and sedative. His skin was a pale, pink-beige color, dampened with what she recognized as perspiration, a biological cooling response unique to several warm-blooded species. Humans, she recalled, sweated when they were afraid as well as when they were hot. She wondered which it was now. "Have we administered analgesics?" she asked. There was a pause. Rosanis turned from his own console, his 4-chambered eyes narrowing in that particular way that meant she had asked a question she was not supposed to ask. He was tall, even by Velhari standards, nearly 2 meters, his scaled skin the color of deep ocean floor, bioluminescent nodes along his collar ridge pulsing a slow, authoritative blue. "We have not," he said. "He is clearly in pain." Yes. That is precisely the point. The Velhari Biological Research Consortium had been studying pain for 60 years. Not curing it. Not treating it. Studying it. Pain, Rosanis had written in his seminal paper. A paper that had earned him 3 academic honors and a permanent berth on the unbroken Meridian, was the body's most honest language. It did not lie. It did not exaggerate for social purposes or minimize for self-preservation. It simply was in direct proportion to damage received. The Velhari themselves felt pain, of course. Every species did in some form. But Velhari pain was a clean, linear signal, damage registered, pain signal sent, behavior modified to reduce further damage. Simple, elegant, functional. Human pain, the few available research samples suggested, was something categorically different. It looped. It echoed. It lived in memory and projected into the future. It could be felt in a limb that no longer existed. It could be worsened by fear, by isolation, by the mere anticipation of more pain to come. And, most extraordinarily, it could be communicated, not through language alone, but through something that the Velhari had no clean word for. The closest translation in their tongue was shared suffering, though Rosanis preferred the clinical term, empathic resonance response. He wanted to document it, measure it, understand the mechanism. He had not, in 60 years of research, considered what it might feel like to be on the receiving end of his study. Marcus Hale was not unconscious. He had been pretending to be. It was a habit from his early military training, the advice his first sergeant had given him on his second deployment. When you don't know your situation, play dead until you do. He'd cataloged the room through slitted eyes. Right. Non-human geometry everywhere. Angles too soft, furniture built for bodies with different proportions. He was strapped, but loosely. The beings on the other side of the glass were watching him. He hurt everywhere. The leg was the worst. He didn't need a medical scanner to know it was bad. He'd seen broken legs before, and the angle of his left shin told a complete and terrible story. Every small motion sent white fire up his thigh and into his hip. He breathed through it in shallow, careful increments, the way the field medic on his second tour had taught him. Small breaths. Count them. Give the pain something to push against. He counted. He watched. He waited. One of the tall ones, the one with glowing blue nodes along its neck, was speaking to the others. He couldn't hear through the glass, but he could read the posture. Authority. Confidence. The posture of someone who felt entirely in control of a situation. Marcus had met men like that before. The ones who were most in control were the ones you had to watch most carefully. He kept counting his breaths. He kept watching. And when a small port in the wall slid open and a thin, metallic arm extended toward him carrying what was clearly a sensor array, he let it approach. He had no good options yet. He needed more information. The sensor touched his arm. On the other side of the glass, 3 monitors lit up simultaneously. Remarkable, breathed Evros. Look at the cortisol gradient. And the neurological interference pattern in the prefrontal region. He is performing anticipatory pain modeling. His brain is actively simulating future pain states before they occur, which amplifies the current pain signal, Veildon said quietly. She was watching the human's face through the glass. He had not moved, but something in his expression, a minute tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible tension in the jaw, communicated something to her that the monitors could not quite quantify. It does, Rosanis confirmed, his voice rich with satisfaction. The pain is not merely the sum of his injuries. It is compounded by his context, his isolation, his uncertainty, his awareness of being observed. He paused on that last word with a kind of reverence. He knows we are watching him, and that knowledge alone is generating a secondary pain response distinct from the physical damage. He knows we're not helping him, Veildon said. Rosanis looked at her. He knows we could help him. That distinction is significant. She turned back to the glass. The human had opened his eyes fully now. He was staring at the observation wall, staring directly, she realized, at the point where she was standing. Not at the room in general. Not at the ceiling. At her. As though he had calculated her precise position through the one-way transparency and decided to look her in the eye anyway. Something moved in her chest. She catalogued it with the same clinical reflex she applied to everything. A minor respiratory irregularity. An elevation in her own cortisol levels. Curiously, she filed it under proximity response and turned back to her console. But her eyes kept returning to the glass. 3 hours into the observation session, Rosanis initiated the next phase of the study, controlled stimuli. A low-frequency acoustic tone was introduced into the chamber, below the threshold of hearing, but registering on the body as a faint vibration. In Velhari test subjects, it produced mild unease. In the human, the monitors showed an immediate spike in pain perception. His body, already in distress, interpreted the unidentifiable vibration as a new threat, and the anticipatory modeling system Evros had identified went into cascade. His brain projecting forward a dozen possible new injuries, each imagined scenario feeding adrenaline into a system already flooded with it, which in turn sharpened the real pain of the real injuries until his breathing changed audibly. Even through the glass, Veildon could hear it. Ragged. Controlled, but only just. The human pressed his head back against the platform and stared at the ceiling. His lips moved. She magnified the visual feed and read them. 1, 2, 3, 4. He was counting. Something in her chest moved again, and this time she could not file it away so neatly. Rosanis, she said. He is counting. Just a self-regulation technique. Fascinating. The prefrontal cortex is attempting to modulate the limbic. He is counting to survive what we are doing to him, she said. Her voice came out strange. Flat and too careful, the way her voice got when she was suppressing something large. He crashed. He has a broken leg and 3 cracked ribs and a head injury. He has been floating alone in a debris field. He does not know where he is or who we are or whether he is ever going home. And he is counting because it is the only tool he has left. The observation room was quiet. Veildon, Rosanis began. I want to know something, she said. She pulled up her own bioscan, the one all researchers wore during studies, monitoring their own physiological state for contamination of results. She turned the display outward so he could see it. My cortisol is elevated. My respiratory rate is elevated. I am displaying a minor but measurable stress response that I cannot attribute to any physical stimulus in this room. She let that sit in the air for a moment. Because there is no physical stimulus in this room. For me. Rosanis studied the readout. His glow nodes pulsed. I am feeling something, she said. Because I can see him. Because I know what he is experiencing. Because something in my neurology, in the same social architecture that makes us a community species, that makes cooperation possible, that has been baked into us by 10,000 years of living together. Something in me is responding to his pain without my consent. She looked at Rosanis. That is the empathic resonance response you came here to study. And you have been measuring it in the wrong subject. The silence that followed was the longest of Veldon's research career. She watched Rosanis cycle through a series of expressions she had never seen on his face before. Dismissal, consideration, recalculation, and something at the end that she tentatively identified as discomfort. Not the clean linear kind. The looping, echoing, anticipatory kind. He looked through the glass at the human, who was still counting. Still breathing. Still refusing, with every measured inhale, to surrender to what was being done to him. Rosanis pulled up his own bioscan. His cortisol was elevated too. He stared at it for a long time. Administer the analgesics, he said finally. His voice was quiet. Full spectrum. And get a structural brace for that limb. Evros moved without question. Veldon was already walking toward the chamber door. She entered the room alone. The human's eyes tracked to her immediately, alert, still cautious, still cataloging her the way she had been cataloging him. She approached the diagnostic platform slowly, keeping her movements visible and unhurried, and when she reached his side she held up the analgesic injector so he could see it clearly before she brought it anywhere near his arm. He watched it. Watched her. Something shifted in his expression, not trust exactly. Not yet. But a loosening of the absolute iron control he had been maintaining for 3 hours. She administered the injection. Within seconds, the monitors on the far wall showed his pain signals beginning to descend. His breathing changed, longer, slower, finally allowed to be. He exhaled. It was the longest exhale she had ever heard from a living creature. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough and quiet. She did not have the words in his language to say what she wanted to say. That she was sorry. That she had understood too late. That something in her chest had been cataloging him the way his brain had been cataloging future pain. Imaging the full shape of what was happening, extrapolating it forward, feeling its weight in her own body. Instead, she said the only phrase she knew with any certainty in his tongue. "You are safe now." His eyes closed. She stood beside him until his breathing steadied into something that resembled, at last, relief. The paper Veldon submitted to the Velhari Biological Research Consortium 6 months later was titled Empathic Resonance as Bidirectional Phenomenon, Observer Effects in Cross-Species Pain Studies. It was the most controversial paper published by the consortium in 40 years. It was also the most cited. Rosanis co-authored it. He had insisted. In the paper's conclusion, Veldon wrote, "We came to study the human capacity for pain. What we discovered instead is that pain, when witnessed, does not stay on one side of the glass. The architecture of empathy is not a flaw in the observer's methodology. It is the finding. We are changed by what we see. This is not contamination. This is contact. And perhaps contact, honest, uncomfortable, and costly, is the only science that has ever truly mattered." Corporal Marcus Hale, for his part, spent 6 weeks recovering aboard the unbroken Meridian before a human vessel could be arranged for his transfer. In that time, Veldon visited him daily. She brought him fluids he could process and sat with him while he learned 15 words in Velhari and she learned 50 in his language. On the day he left, he shook her hand, a human contact greeting she had learned, that meant something between "I acknowledge you and I trust you and I am glad we are both still here." She held the gesture for a long moment, feeling the warmth of his fingers, the slight tremble in them that she now understood was not weakness but the accumulated release of a very long ordeal. "You counted," she said. "When it was hardest. You counted." He looked at her with an expression she had spent 6 weeks learning to read. She was fairly certain, the one that meant yes, but I didn't have to do it alone. So did you, he said. She didn't argue. She watched the transport until it disappeared into the dark between the stars, and she stood there long after it was gone, cataloging, for once, not the data of the moment, but the simple, irreducible fact of it. She had felt his pain. And it had made her better.